if there was no other lesson of this workshop, when you have a wings, you have the memory of the event, you have the record of the event, which is still hard to come by. Okay, sure.
My name is Sylvia Richardson. I'm the host of Latin Waves, and thank you. A show about community, and our goal is to create community that transcends borders. And when I was first invited to speak about Montreal Massacre, two things came to mind. And here we go again, talking about minorities. And it's interesting that anytime we talk about women's issues, we address it as a minority issue, or as an issue of, something that doesn't warrant everyday coverage. And I don't know, maybe someone can explain to me later how more than half of the population amounts to a minority, or allows to treat themselves to be a minority. But here we are. And so I like to cover the way I cover every one of my stories on Latin Waves, and that is first talking a little bit about our common history as women, and how does the media portray women, and particularly violence against women, the so what of that story, why does it matter, and what can we do about it, what are we going to do about it, because ultimately markers, are great, we should remember. But if we don't move beyond that remembering component, I believe we're wasting our time. So I'm hoping that we can engage in a bit of dialogue. So I didn't grow up in Canada, but I came here when I was 15, and so I've been accustomed to many of the media trends in this country. And some of the commercials that over the time have depicted the role of women as domestic, as subservient, as docile, nurturing, all those other nice things that we are accredited with. And so I was looking for, I didn't know we would have a projector, but I was hoping to present some images. And one of the ones I came across was this picture of a woman with a duster on one hand and an apron on the other, and she's wearing high heels, and she's got her hair perfectly done. And I thought, that's how we are asked to see ourselves, as this little mechanical cleaners, we pick up everything, we clean everything. But more than that, the message had a sign, and it said, the harder she works, the cuter she looks. This was an actual commercial for vitamins, and the guy was smiling, and she was smiling, dotting wise. And I thought, well, that was then, right? Surely we've moved beyond that. The 60s and the 70s came, and we have power. At least in the Western world, we believe we are better than most women somewhere else. And I thought, well, what does that power really amount to? What does it really mean in terms of power? We still don't have pay equity. Women still make 70 cents to every dollar a man makes. We still don't have childcare services, something we've been calling for many years. We still don't have a substantial number of women representing us in power. So what does it really mean? Well, surely we have a voice, we can bring our issues to the table. And then the issue of violence came back, this whole, nagging issue, and I thought, well, let's talk about violence, because violence is covered every day in our media. We see all kinds of violence stories covered. But how does it cover the issue of violence against women? I can't think of his name right now, the writer who wrote The War on Women,
Dave Ali,
thank you, writes about this cultural war that we live in. We talk about the war in Iraq, the war on drugs, the war on crime. There's all kinds of drugs. But there's one war we never talk about, and that is the war on women. During the period of his research from 2000 to 2006, he uncovered that 5 times more women were murdered by their spouses than those who died in the military, in the police office, and security service. And this should cause us to stop and pause for a second. Why? Why is it that none of the stories are covered? Or are they? The stories we hear today, the story of Le Pen, or the story of the latest murder, the guy who mutilated that model, Jenkins, I believe, the murder. It's portrayed to us as an one-off, an abhorrent man who went psycho and killed a woman, or someone who completely unstable, and end of story. It doesn't happen every day. We don't have to worry about it. Let psychologists deal with the psyche of men who go crazy and do those things. The majority of people don't do that, right? Wrong again. According to the statistics we see, and I think we'll probably hear more about it from Nicole Lee, women who work in rape relief will tell you that the numbers of victims from violence against women are growing. In this country alone, over 100,000 women are living in fear in shelters across this country. So, like every war, the war on women also has its refugees. And these women are moving across this country invisible. Why invisible? Because the more we become accustomed to us being portrayed in the media as a minority, or as someone that doesn't have the power, the political power, to enforce a responsive policy from government, and that has to come on our shoulders, because we are a huge number and we're incredibly powerful when we want to be. And the problem is that we have been told for too long now that we can't change anything. We live in a patriarchal society, it's a male-dominated society, get used to it. And on the other hand, we're also telling our daughters that we have equality, that you can be anything you want and you can have a partnership of equality in your marriage. Somewhere, we're lying. We're either lying to ourselves, or we're lying to our children, or we're doing both. So, understanding where we come from, how does that patriarchy structure that feeds racism and sexism and pairs us, poor against rich, black against white, how does that continuously perpetuate and exacerbate the suffering of women? Unless we're able to look at this critically and say, part of the problem is that we're not connecting the dots. We're not looking at this critically. We have this short-term vision, we go from the one reality TV to the next one, and we forget the bigger picture really is about transforming our society. It's not going to happen by accident. The conservative government is now talking about describing violence not as violence against women, because that's not politically correct. We have equality according to the politics, right? So they call it family violence, a much nicer name. It happens, women can be violent too, so it's not just women. So the more we allow for this labeling to go on without any real action. Words are wonderful, but unless they're attached to action, it means nothing. Which brings me to the next part of, we understand where we come from. We know we live in a patriarchal society. We know we live in a system that is deeply inequitable, that is racist, sexist, that has perpetuated privilege for a very small group of people in society. The next question we need to ask is, what are we going to do about it? Now, I, as I mentioned, didn't grow up in Canada. And where I come from, we take politics in a very different way. And you may have heard there's a coup in Honduras. Some of you may have. If you listen to Latin Way, you would hear the story. But what I wanted to share with you is that Latin America also is a patriarchal society. They have a male-dominated system. And yet, women are not content to simply access levels of political discourse. They want more than that. And so when we talk about what do we want in Latin America, is we want to transform the system. But before we transform the system, we need to transform ourselves. We need to transform women. How do we see ourselves? How do we see ourselves as catalysts of our own society, as change makers? We can create a society where we have a voice, where we not only have a voice, but we also have actions attached to that voice. And we can create that. Now, in Honduras, as any place where military dictatorships take place, women are constantly under attack. Sex terror is on the increase. Women are being raped. Many women are being constantly accosted. And yet, when you interview them and you ask them, what inspires you to keep fighting in spite of the repression that is so real that you experience every day? They say to you, it's not about today. It's about what we want for our future. It's about having a right to not only dream a different reality, but to create that reality. And that begins with each and every one of us. And that begins today. And that begins when we each join in solidarity. So it's not enough to talk about this issue. It's not enough to address what the root causes are. We need to do something about it. In Bolivia, the women have not only taken over the government with Evo Morales, they now have a new constitution where women have equality under the law, but not just women, nature. Imagine that. Nature, this idea that we have to live in balance within the world that we live in. This idea that we can create a society that not only acknowledges that you and I are equal, but also that there are others that we must consider if we're going to live sustainably. In Venezuela, the same thing is changing. And so I want to encourage you all to realize that change begins with us. When you go home today and you turn on the TV and you see images of women being depicted, where the last one, I was watching this paper, and there's a woman painted as a Kanak flag. And I thought, that's a perfect opportunity. Call that paper. Tell them, I will not subject myself to this. Turn the channel, change, walk out of that room. I mean, we can speak volumes with our actions, but more than that, act on it. There are ways for us to organize. Each and every one of you are connected to many other communities. Use that power, organize that power, and you got to begin by dissenting, by not supporting a mainstream media that continuously perpetuate an image that subjugates us to a second-class citizen. We are not, and we must be prepared to change that. So in closing, I just want to drive that without us taking direct action, without us reclaiming our right to be feminists, our right to call ourselves women, our right to call ourselves equal, it's not going to change. No one's going to bring that for us. Any victory we've ever gained has been through struggle, and struggle we must. So thank you so much for being here and joining. But leave empowered, knowing that there are others out there in this world working with a lot less resources than we have. We have everything we need here. We have the intellect, we have the resources, we even have more money than they do. Many of the women in Honduras live on less than $1 a day. So that's no longer an excuse. So unite we must, and fight we must.